3 million years from Earth, the Red Dwarf Podcast, thanks for the memory. Its crew, Blake Braswell, a native of the United States, and Lee Malaby, his English co-host. Additional. As we travel further down the list of episodes, I am thankful my time spent working at a Renaissance fair has prepared me to enjoy jokes referencing Shakespeare and Sir Francis Bacon. I can also smoke a mean turkey leg while using a dodgy English accent. What's up, Smegheads? And welcome to Series 3, Episode 2 of Thanks for the Memory, a Red Dwarf podcast where we rewatch every episode of the BBC comedy show Red Dwarf and discuss them. And as you now can tell, we have a new intro, because since they stopped doing the Holly intros, we decided to write our own.
Oh, and I will say now Blake's are going to be far better than mine are, but I will put that out there categorically right now. That was brilliant.
Look, so it was tough because at first I was trying to be too clever. And then it occurred to me, like, no, actually, what makes those Holly intros so funny is, like, they aren't, like, weird. They aren't setups for great things. They're almost like a weird sidestep to what he's talking about. So there you go.
It's going to be difficult. I'm not a comedy writer by any stretch of the imagination, so we'll see where mine go. But the idea now is that the episode I host, I will come up with that, and then Blake will come up with them. So some will be much better than others.
I love it. I have full faith in you.
Oh, no, I don't.
Your dodgy English accent's way better than mine.
It is dodgy as well. Yes, we are, as Blake said there, we are talking about Series 3, Episode 2, that is Marooned, which originally aired in the UK on November 21st, 1989. And the synopsis for this episode was the Red Dwarf crew abandons ship as Red Dwarf approaches black holes. Rimmer and Lister find themselves marooned on an ice planet when Starbug is struck by a meteorite, where the only firewood is Rimmer's possessions and the only food they have is dog food and a pot noodle and some Bonjela gel and some water biscuits and some other random things.
I will first say, and I think you might have alluded to this in the previous episode, I'll just go and get straight to an outstanding character. She wasn't in it a ton, but Holly was her kickoff to this episode with the awooga, there's a daffodil, my language, whatever programming is messed up, but like, oh my God, her delivery is so good.
So this is where I've been thinking about this. I have a weird fixation on the way people deliver things. And it's odd, right? It's not necessarily a comedy way. It's weird. It's weird, this fixation I have, right? So she comes on at the beginning, the alarm's going off, abandon ship. And then the alarm goes off and she's like, oh no, the alarm's broken now. Awooga, abandon ship. Like anyone else normally would have said awooga, abandon ship, but she doesn't. She says awooga, abandon ship, and I just love the way she says that. It's so weird and so random, but I just love it.
I love this. Is not a daffodil. Oh my God, it's so good. That opening is so great. I actually wrote that it's kind of funny. The first episode with her as Holly, we didn't get a little more of something like this. Because if you think, she's barely in that previous episode, but here's this new concept. Crichton is in it quite a lot.
Yeah.
But you don't get much of her. And she is not in this like throughout the whole episode, but in it just enough to like really kind of, you get the vibe for her, Holly.
100%. It's like, how did you not spot the black holes? Well, you see, the thing about space is it's black. The thing about space is it's the general space color. The color of space is black, and the thing about black holes is they're black. So how are you supposed to spot them?
I love the thing about the color of space. The general color, the repetition of that is like,
because she doesn't want to see it.
It has to be intentional. It is a dumb person's version of the Douglas Adams, the way he writes things. Like where he's in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's like, space. Space is big, like bigger than you can imagine. Yes. I'm paraphrasing here. And we're not just talking about a shop down to the trip down to the chemist. This is a really big place. Yeah. Or like the Vogon ships floated into Earth's atmosphere, much the way bricks don't. It reminds me of that, except it's this moron computer like like doing it.
But how many times have you referenced the fact that this feels very much like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
I mean, I just think there's no way that I don't know how you work on something, especially the time period they were, and you're just not influenced by. I mean, the BBC radio show is brilliant. The BBC show was brilliant. The books are brilliant. Like, but it's a very different. I mean, it is a very different vibe. I mean, you do have this Arthur Dent, the schlub, who's a hero. That's like when I think of books, that's such a common thing now, right? Like Marvel movies, Star-Lord, he's a slob, right? And it's a thing now to sort of make that main character unexpected that way. I feel like Arthur Dent's one of the early ones, and then Dave Lister is like if you thought Arthur Dent was a mess, like we've ratcheted it up. So you can definitely feel a little influence there. I absolutely adore it. I was thinking of Dave Lister as I visited Pennsylvania this past weekend on holiday to go see some friends and go to the Renaissance Fair I used to work at, which is why it led to me writing this opening.
I thought it was a Halloween Horror Nights reference, to be fair.
Well, I went to this place called the Bull's Head Pub that opened when I was there, and there's this nice gentleman from Liverpool that opened it, and he runs it like a proper British pub. No TVs, like no table service, like it's so great. I mean, I adore that place. And there are these gigantic signs that weren't there before that he brought in from Liverpool. Like one's like a farm fertilizer sign that it's stuff that he brought over. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to talk to Lee about red dwarfs. So I'm sitting here grabbing a pull draft, watching this thing over here.
You look at, again, so looking at this episode again, it does exactly what Red Dwarf does. There's no lead in, there's no like easy sort of slow lead up to the premise. It's like, bang, the alarm's going off, we've got 15 minutes to get off the ship, off we go.
This is the one that I mistakenly attributed to the previous episode, that a original opening of this was them playing strip poker together.
Okay.
And the cat had all his clothes because he has so many clothes, even though he's lost a bunch, he still has so many pieces. And Crichton's got his like black metal pieces off and it's fleshy underneath like his head. It's a very weird description. And then the alarm was supposed to go off, but they cut it for time.
I think I like it as it is. Like you say, you don't need any BS at the beginning. Just get on with it.
No. And we didn't really talk about it in the previous episode, but the new intro without the Holly intro and the dramatic music that it does, which is that sound that the Starbug makes when the meteorite hits it.
Yes.
It kicks off down, 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 down. It's a very different intro and it's way peppier. It's got more like the shows kick off with a little more energy. I think because of the way this intro is now.
I think when those first two series came out, it was obviously intentional, and I think they were trying to. So you've kind of said it. You first put it on, and there's that, and you're like, oh, what's this? This looks interesting. Like as a sci-fi nerd, you're like, oh, this looks a cool ship, and then. And then bang into something else going, whoa, what the hell is this? And it kind of tells you everything you need to know about Red Dwarf in like a 30-second clip that you think it's some one thing, but it really isn't. It's this other ridiculous thing. And now they know, with 3 series in now, people know what we're about, or you should know what we're about right now. So we don't need to do that lead in anymore. We can just go, bang, let's just get straight into it.
And they've leaned into the fact like, hey, we've got a theme song people like.
Yeah.
So we're just getting, and I love the like electric guitar that's in there now. Oh man, I don't know. I've got these guitars sitting in my house. I don't know how I haven't sat down to learn that, but I need to.
Yes, you do.
That was the first note I wrote, was the new intro kicks the show off with pep. I think I noticed that more I don't know why in this particular episode compared to the previous one. But maybe it's because it does this and rolls straight into the alarm, right? And I love the use of good writing to move along the plot. Like she's doing all this crazy stuff, and you see the ships taking off, and through her thing explaining, we're gonna go here. I'm gonna navigate the Red Dwarf. You guys go fly off, and and it kind of just gets that all out of the way.
Yeah, you don't need to. Like, and it's like we've said, it's weird as well with it because. Like the American shows, you think they would be and I don't mean the American Red Dwarf, I just mean American comedy shows in general. We talked about how the average US comedy show is like 21 minutes, yet Red Dwarf's 29. So they've got more time to play with, but yet they're tighter with what they do than an American show that's got less time. It
feels like they're like, I wish you gave us 10 more minutes. You know what I mean? Still in each episode.
And yet they're 8 minutes longer than the average US show.
Now, I do love that, and of course, it's because of the story they want to tell, but like, I do love that they split the two ships up. Starbug goes off, and the blue midget goes off the other direction. In the blue ship, we've got Kat and Crichton, our new, Crichton, our new character, or our B character, you want to call him, kind of how Kat has been a B character. And then you got Rimmer and Lister in the other one. I just find it fascinating how they split off, especially because in the future, everybody will just ride Starbug anyway.
I wonder why they chose. Well, we know why they chose them too, because the Rimmer and Lister together are the ones that give you everything that went on. It makes perfect sense.
Well, and it's kind of funny to go from this first new episode in backwards, where here's this crazy premise, here's the new android, here's how Rimmer behaves with him, and all this new stuff, and then the second episode is, and this is going to be all about Dave and Arnold.
Yes, we're back to like the original episodes, really. Yeah.
So I think as much as like getting some new stuff in there to shake it up a little bit, I love how they know what their bread and butter is. And of course, at this point, they are so good at writing for the two of them.
Yes.
I just adore, and this is one of those English things that you just don't get in American comedy. But like when Lister is talking about Rimmer's like love for, the military stuff or whatever. And he's like, but you're a coward, and talks about the bar fight they got into. And he says, you are out the door quicker than a whippet with a bum full of dynamite.
Yes.
That's like, God, what a good line.
Yeah. It's so random. But that's where I wish I think I alluded to it on the last episode. I wish they'd referenced the bar fight from backwards as that. I know they wouldn't have been able to tell that whole story that he tells there about, you said it, but right to his face and all that. They wouldn't have been able to tell that whole story, but I just would have loved, for continuity's sake, for them to have referenced, when we were on Earth in that backwards weird thing, you went under the table or whatever it was, just it would have been, just for me, just for that continuity would have been better.
Well, and we get this taste of this weird side of Rimmer, which has been alluded to a little bit, but they start to lean into now. And I actually think within a few episodes, it actually comes to a head a little bit. But Rimmer's like gross dream of how glorious it is, these generals drinking fine wine while people die at their command because of their orders and stuff. And he just loves it and thinks it's the sexiest thing ever, and it's so gross. And then for the character you've set up for Lister, he just thinks it's so gross because, like, he's like, those are, how do you think that that's, glory?
Yeah.
And this side of Rimmer becomes, well, it's a thing that they'll lean into more as the series goes. And I love how strong we kick off with this.
And they're going, because they talk about, and it starts off with them going through his trunk, and he's like, what the hell are these figures? They're not like Cindy where you can take the clothes off them. Napoleon's Armée du Nord. And then he gets all his money out, and he's like, how much is here? And he's like, it looks like about 20 grand. It's like, just a few coppers I managed to throw away from time to time. It looks like there's about 20 grand, 24, but anyway, put it back in the trunk with you. And he's like, you're tighter than an Italian waiter's keks you are. And I was like, do you know what keks are?
I do not.
So it depends where in the UK you're from. See, keks to me would be, you would call them underpants. But then other people will refer to keks as trousers. I would say the underpants to me, if I would say keks.
And of course they're Italian, so we're talking like tight Speedos tiles, like kind of what
that's what I would look at. Yeah, but they could be trousers. I mean, it works either way, to be fair.
This whole bit with the two of them, like, again, you're just like, you feel the fact it's been another year so well. And like, they're still learning stuff from each other because Rimmer is notoriously tight-lipped. And I love the idea that, of course, it's because they had this idea for the plot of the show. But I love the idea that, like, there's this important chest for Rimmer that he's kind of kept hidden, but because things could go bad on the Red Dwarf, he's forced to bring it out.
Yes.
And brings it along with him. Where we get And when Lister's talking about, him loving all this stuff and war and everything, and Rimmer goes into his story, which was my second choice for my audition that I talked about in the previous one as a monologue, about how he knew that he had lived at the time of Macedonia, had been with Alexander the Great. That punchline of Lister, like, you were Alexander the Great, no, I was Alexander the Great's chief eunuch, is so good. And I hope the trivia I read is true, that the first time they did that take, Craig Charles lost it when he said Alexander the Great's chief eunuch, and they had to do the whole bit over again because it is kind of in one take. God, so friggin' good. It's just, I wrote somewhere in here, like, we're adding to the lore of Red Dwarf, the idea of Arnold Rimmer and him being attached to thinking he was part of something greater in a past life, and it was the chief eunuch. And then even when you're like, well, that's so stupid, the eunuch, but he's like, no, don't you see, if it is Alexander the Great, it wouldn't be true because that's what I want. But instead he gave me the chief eunuch, so I was there. Like, and you're like, God, that's
it's more believable.
I love how you're right. He just explained how the person scammed him. Like, literally. Like,
Donald, who went to see it, he said he could regress me. Donald, his name was. I don't know why that's funny, but it is.
What I wrote, so that whole argument happens, and because I keep loving how they're getting better effects, when we actually get to the crux of what will make the inciting incident of the episode, the fireball, the flaming asteroid that hits Starbug, is such a great effect.
Yes.
And its noise kicks off the theme song now too, which I love. But it's a great effect that I was like, to make it look like the flame was weightless, they dropped this thing on fire and filmed it from below. And I just love that.
I never noticed that.
I'm like, I had to go back and look, like, oh, look at, see, and those little attentions to detail you were talking about. Like, I do like so when they filmed Starbug, it was like this. Going up and down so that it would look like the flames weren't behaving correctly.
Okay.
As far as gravity is concerned.
Interesting.
It is interesting that we have two. Well, I guess it's not a space anomaly; it's an asteroid. But we've had two space things that we ran into to kick off the previous episode.
Technically 3,
and this episode.
Technically 3, because you want to
the
throw
black
holes in as well. Even though, spoilers, there wasn't any.
There were not.
Because the thing about space is, the actual colour of space is it's black. And the thing about grit is, shut up.
I love it. So good.
There was a Britishism I didn't know whether you caught that I definitely wanted to bring up. So I can't remember now exactly where it was. But I think it might have been when Lister's wanted to have a look inside Rimmer's trunk for the first time. And he says, come on, let's have a goosey. Do you know what a goosey is?
Is that like taking a gander? Is that where that comes from?
So I actually looked it up because I didn't fully, because I assume it's Cockney rhyming slang, and it is, but it's evolved quite a lot. So I actually looked it up. So apparently it would originally have been a goose and duck look. But apparently back in the early 1900s, goose had a sexual meaning. I didn't look up to find out what the hell that was, because I don't know how goose has a sexual meaning, but, who knows about those early 1900s people. So they changed it.
I've always heard give someone a goose means you goose their bottom.
Yes.
You give them a squeeze, right? Yeah.
I'm assuming it's more than that. I will look it up at some point. So they changed it to gander, a gander and duck look. And then obviously it's kind of evolved to a goosey gander, a goose. So I thought it was quite interesting.
And now we say, take a gander over there.
Yeah, so take a look.
Do you guys say that a lot? We say that all the time.
I mean, no.
Okay, in America, again, that's how when you said it, I was like, I don't know what that means technically, but I'm a goose. I'm going to guess gander, take a look around.
Yeah.
Because we say that all the time.
That's
What's
weird,
over there?
though,
I don't know, go take a gander.
Very much a British thing, a gander.
Yeah.
Strange, isn't it?
To be fair, it could be a very southern thing, too. I found there's some sound substitutions and some word substitutions that are very specific to a section of eastern North Carolina that there's a guy who did a dialect study, and I had his textbook in college, and he specifically talked about this area very near where I grew up and the similarities to sound substitutions and some of the verbiage from certain areas of England.
Interesting. I suppose it kind of makes sense when you think, like, America's made up of people from all over Europe, basically. So you would think a lot of that would make it over there. But again, like you say, in specific areas, because dependent on where people settled when they came over. This is not a history podcast, by the way. This is a red dwarf.
But it could become one. No, and that area is close to Dare, where the first where the lost colony was, where the first colony was in the New World. So there you go.
Yeah, that took a turn.
Yeah.
We would never have this conversation if I'd have started this podcast with another British person.
No, probably not. No. And there's some arguments that the way that Tidewater, I'll have to find you this. It's a very hard thing. My mom actually has a recording from an old lady, but the Tidewatered area of North Carolina along the Outer Bank does not sound like Southern or me or anything you've heard.
Okay.
And linguistics, whoever does something for, I don't know what college, university is attached to the Globe Theatre now in the UK, out in London.
Me either.
That dialect, they're like, that is as close as you could get to an Elizabethan dialect.
Okay.
And it's weird sounding, man. You hear, you go, that doesn't sound, you sound like Canadian and English, and what is this mixture? It doesn't sound right. The words, I'm like, you're from where? And it's this little bitty island in North Carolina. It's weird, man.
I need to hear that.
Yeah, I'll find a Tidewater accent and send it to you, and you'll be like, "What? What is that?" So there you go. That'll be for our other pod.
British American dialect, the podcast. Yeah. Two things I need to bring up. One leads into the other. So I mentioned on the last episode how, I mean, we've mentioned it through the entire first two series of how Rimmer being a hologram sometimes just gets ignored, and other times it's played into quite heavily. So Rimmer is on, so when they crash land on the planet, and I do find it hilarious when it comes in, it's like, still snowing then, is it? Such a British comment. Because we would do that every time. If you come in absolutely covered in snow, or if it was pouring down and you're covered soaking, oh, it's still raining, is it then? It's so facetious that it's exactly what we would have said. But Rimmer's on the radio trying to get in touch with anybody, basically, doing his own Mayday, Mayday. How is he pressing the button on that intercom?
I don't know, because he definitely is, right?
Yeah.
Like he is pressing that button.
Yes.
And it's so, he had to ask that too. It's so weird to me that he's doing that. We talked about production value and money increasing. The scene of Lister out in the snow getting kicked around and stuff, that looks really good.
It really does. Because I wonder where they filmed that, because it doesn't look like a soundstage.
No, it doesn't, but it looks fantastic. And it is a great use of, I love good slapstick comedy.
Yes.
I am not opposed to cheesy humor. There's good cheese, right? And it's a bit is so great. It's so good. And it's a perfect setup to walking in after getting his ass kicked and still snowing, is it?
Hilarious. And then it's like,
so good.
Why is it May Day? Why is it not Ascension Sunday? Fifth Wednesday after Pentecost. And this is something that Tracy pointed out. How is it someone as relatively well educated as Rimmer, doesn't know where May Day comes from, but Lister, who's thick as tells him where the term May Day comes from, because it's French. It's like May Day, and he's like, how does Lister know that, but Rimmer doesn't? I
love his pronunciation of it too, and he's like May Day, like he stretches it out so far. Help me, like, you idiot. And it's this thing where I've never quite, I don't know if they've ever answered this question, but like, did Lister do this thing? Here we go. We haven't gotten deep in a few episodes.
Okay. So I'm interested now.
We know Lister's like upbringing is rough, right? And they'll get more into that as the series goes. But like, so clearly, because he's very clever and very street smart. He's a very smart person. Now, this is the same person in the previous episodes, like, no.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Bulgarian. It's Bulgarian. Like he does know stuff, and he is smart, but it's almost like that rebellious thing where it's like, oh, you think I'm an idiot? Fine, I'll just be an idiot.
Yes.
And so it's interesting, because there are times where he totally smacks down something that Rimmer totally should know and doesn't. And listeners, I feel like we had one of those in series 2 as well. But I love that because it also makes him real, because I think if you just, and they will even more so lean into him being a gross slob, although he gets grosser as time goes because he's just alone. I mean, too, I think it's part of that. But if you didn't have stuff like this, I think he'd almost be not identifiable.
Yeah, you feel like a caricature rather than a real person. Yeah. And we've said that before. The characters are real. So to quote myself again, the characters are real. It's the situations that are ridiculous. And I think that's what makes it as good as it is because of that. But
I would layer onto that. In this situation, it isn't a ridiculous situation.
That's true. Yeah,
they are marooned, and it's very dangerous. And so Lister has dropped that facade and is like, just you idiots, you know what I mean? Like,
the whole episode's very real.
Yeah, and it's why it's so good. You actually have this. I said this last night. My wife was like, "This is so good because it's like a stage play." And it said Craig Charles admitted in an interview it's his favorite episode because it would have made a good stage play, and that Chris Berry had also said it was one of his favorites because it is. It's just a play with two guys.
Yes.
Here's the situation. Here's what they're in, and what's crazy about it is, it could be any story about being marooned in a car in the icy snow or on a boat, whatever. But in this case, one of them's dead and is a hologram, right? And that's what like adds to it. But I do love that the sense of danger with that, where Rimmer's like, well, as long as there's battery power, I don't die.
Yeah,
but you will. But I also love that, like, oh, does he care about Lister? But there's also a part that's like, yeah, but eventually the battery dies and Lister's his only hope for flying this thing out or fixing it. So it's probably still self-serving, like, in the long run. When it talks about bringing up, he's like, you've got to eat food or whatever. Here's the food we've got. I'm now going to start making this a habit. Lore established! ! Here's a lore established that will come into play for several gags throughout the rest of the series' life. Lister hates pot noodles.
Oh, yeah. Do you have pot noodles over there?
Frankly. Well, I wrote, as a kid, when I saw this, I had no idea what pot noodles were. And then I learned, it's just it's like the instant ramen kind of, like, it's just, and there's
but they're like
pot
the
noodle
worst
cup
version of them. Yeah, like a cup noodle, but like the worst version of them.
Yeah. It's so, as a kid, when I finally figured out, I was like, well, I like ramen. I don't understand why he doesn't. So I never had... I would love to try this very bad version of pot noodle.
They were full of MSG back in the day. That's what they were like. They were notorious for just being the worst, like the most unhealthy sort of fast, quick meal you could possibly have. Full
just
of MSG
a fatty noodle and a ton of MSG.
Yeah, basically. I don't mind a pot noodle every now and again. They're just expensive for what they are.
But I had no idea what that when I was a kid. I didn't get that pot noodle. I didn't even know what he was saying. I was like, what's a pot noodle? I didn't even register that it was pot noodle. Like, I was like, what does that mean?
Is it like a pot pie? And this is like a pot noodle. I suppose from an American's point of view, you had no point of reference for it.
I was like, what is this? I only discover like later what it was.
Yeah, it's just noodles in a pot. It's exactly what it says on the tin.
It is exactly what it is. But these guys, I mean, like you said it, like it's the two of these guys. This episode is so great. They just get to breathe.
Yeah.
They don't rush things. They feel like they're just hanging out, hoping for the best.
Do you think, you kind of brought it up earlier on, do you think that because of how much changed in the last episode between Parallel Universe and then backwards, that we had such a change with not having to briefly explain in the scroll what happened to Lister and his pregnancy, and then bringing Crichton in and bringing Holly, like Holly's change to Hilly in, that they wanted the core audience that have really got to love the show, that we want to show you that it's not changed too much. These are the characters that you love. They're not going away. That dynamic between Dave and Rimmer is still going to be there. We don't want you to think that it's now something completely different to it was. So we're going to give you this episode here, which is just them two there, just to kind of allay anyone's fears that it's going to become something that it wasn't when it started.
I think that is exactly why this is the second episode. Like, you could almost argue that they could have done it as the first episode, but I like... it would have been too much if you'd imagine the crawl before the beginning of this, episode like that. That would be nuts.
I think you needed to introduce Holly and the new Holly and Crichton in a way. Well, to be fair, they probably did it in the perfect way. We talked about it on the last episode, didn't we? That they could have eased it in and they could have done that slow build up. But I think just dropping them in and getting on with it was probably the best thing to do.
Oh yeah, and I agree. I think that you do this and you set these two guys alone, and you've seen them alone, but not in a way that's like, oh, this is bad. One of them. It's what do they call that term in shows? It's a bottle episode where we're going to save a little money by having everything basically be in one room.
Yeah, but it works.
We're not going to go, even though they did do the snow bit, I will say.
Yeah.
Which was definitely not in the same room.
No, it wasn't.
It's so good though. It really is like, they've done great performances, but in all honesty, in this particular episode, they're actors. You know what I mean? Like it feels that way. I had a question for you. Britishism.
I love these.
When they were talking about how'd you lose your virginity, and Lister's talking about how she was so beautiful she could have worked the perfume counter at Lewis's. So what's the perfume counter at Lewis's?
I don't know what Lewis's is unless it's John Lewis, which is like a sort of. So it's just I think Lewis's still exists as or John Lewis is like a high end like department store. And it would always, I guess, assume that the perfume counter generally had good-looking women working on it.
I mean, that's from context. Like, that's the immediate assumption I go to.
I'm assuming it's John Lewis is what they're talking about. And John Lewis still exists, but it sells way more than that now, and most of it's online, to be fair, as is everything nowadays.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, that's pretty standard.
Yeah,
but that was when I was like, oh, I wonder if Lee has been to a Lewis's. I was very curious.
If it is, I think I've only ever set foot at John Lewis like once.
So, I love the Rimmer's story of losing his virginity because of the whole, what was it like? Oh, brilliant car. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, and the way he's describing everything. But Lister's story is weird, right? You definitely wouldn't do this now.
Because
he's like
12.
Because he was 12, right? And it's so, I mean, look, 13's, God, that's still, but there's somebody saying it's 12, you're like, oh no.
And they drag it out.
They do drag it out.
How old were you? Oh, she was so beautiful, she could have worked on the perfume counter. But how old were you? Oh, she just stood there, like, completely naked. I nearly dropped my skateboard. Skateboard? How old were you? I was 12. 12? Well, you can't have been a full member of the golf club then. And then from that point on, that's what Rimmer focuses on. Not the fact that he was 12, the fact that he wasn't a member of the golf club.
I think that's where it moves on. It kind of works. Like,
yes.
Yeah, just the whole, like, you couldn't have been a full member. Like, I like it. God, so good. And like, I used to golf, people that take advantage of the facilities.
Brilliant. I think you're right. That's why it works, and they probably got away with it even back then because of that.
You could have said any age, and it would be like
even 15.
Younger than Rimmer.
Yeah, even if it was 15.
13 even. But like 15 would have. But yeah, like 12, you're like, oh no. But then to get deep divey on the characters again, it's funny how as a kid when I saw that was a funny joke. And in context, when I watched the episode the first time this time, I'm like, oh gosh, I forgot it was that young. This is kind of weird and it's messed up. Then on the second viewing of the episode last night, I was like, well, this does kind of fit with his sad childhood and upbringing where he just really wasn't and didn't have like a father figure.
Yeah.
And we'll learn more about that later. But I was like, man, it's if you took the punchlininess out of it, like it's still kind of sad. We've talked about how both Rimmer and Lister, part of what works about them for being real is they both have like sad stories. Like they come from sad places growing up. So it does. Now, do I think that's what the writers were thinking? And they were just like, how young can we get? And it's still funny, right?
Yes, without it being super creepy.
Yeah. And instead it does. You hear it and you're like, oh man. then you're like so thankful the Rimmer starts talking about the golf club membership. You're like, oh, thank God.
Like you say, I think that's why even today they probably still get away. I think you'd still watch it now and you wouldn't dwell on it so much because they steer it in a different direction pretty much immediately.
Right. And of course you find out like Lister does not have a good relationships with women and stuff. No. So again, like in full context of the show, it's not, because the problem is like you're making it sound like that's a good thing, right? Like that he did that.
Yeah.
But in the full context of the show, like dude's had serious problems, like, so, making connections and stuff. So I don't know, but definitely we had to address it. I was like, it's because it definitely, you're like, oh no, I had not seen this episode in a while. I knew the joke was coming, but I did not think it was 12.
It's funny how we've talked how much of a character study this is, and they're quite deep with each other, but still total assholes to each other.
Just brutal.
Like really brutal. It's like when they're talking about, I've burnt all the books and now like what's left to burn, we're gonna have to burn your trunk. Not the trunk, it's the only thing my father left me. It's like, but we're gonna have to, it's just stuff, it'll be fine. And then it's like, well, what about your guitar? But that's my guitar. And it's like, it's the only thing in my life that hasn't walked away from me. And Rimmer leans over his shoulder and you think he's going to go, it's like, but you've got to. And like, just shows how much he doesn't give a right?
Yeah, no, but you've got to. And you're the one that'll starve, so you have to do it. Yeah. I did write down the change in filming technique. For once they get marooned, if you'll notice, because there's a lot of different angles and close-ups that you've never seen before, the cameras are handheld. They chose to make them handheld and move closer so that it would feel claustrophobic like they did. The shot where he is, I forget what he's looking at, but like the camera's like right here making an angle, almost like if you were going to do a selfie or something, like that kind of an angle. And I was like, oh, this looks different. And then I went back and looked at it. Yeah, and they said for the marooned portions, it's all done on handheld so that it feels different. Which that's a change for them too, We get another Porky Roebuck story.
Yes, we do.
Which I quite appreciate. That name keeps showing up.
Threw his shoes in the septic tank. I was sad because I was still in them.
Yeah, and Porky Roebuck has to be the name of someone that worked on this show.
You would think so,
like,
yeah.
Bully,
or it might have been like one of Grant Naylor or Doug Naylor or Rob Grant's, like one of their childhood buddies or something. Like a bully from their childhood or something.
Yeah, that name is just too good to not be real for someone.
Just briefly going back to the trunk and the guitar section. When we were watching it, Tracy was like, Rimmer's an asshole, isn't he? Because at the end of the day, right, he wants Lister to burn his guitar. So the person that can actually touch and use the thing that they're wanting to burn has to burn it. And then the person that can't do anything with their thing other than look at it is like, nah, you're not burning that.
You're not burning it. And he has to use the scutters to look at it. And we have not seen scutters in 2 episodes, by the way.
That's very true. I never noticed that.
Scutters fall off a bit, if I remember correctly, and pop back in later, but they fall off quite a bit in the show. Why? Because you get Crichton.
Yes, okay.
So the scutters kind of fall off.
Yeah, you're right.
But I love the whole, like you burn this, burn that, and it's made of camphor wood, which I had to look up camphor wood, and it is a cool wood. I forgot there's some things that it's used for that I was surprised by, but I couldn't find anything about it necessarily being super expensive, although this is the future, so whatever.
Yeah, it is made out that camphor wood's like a special wood for it to be made out of.
Yeah, that's like a big deal. Although it wouldn't surprise me looking up camphor wood, CAMPHOR. It may not be that special, but he's convinced it is. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. His dad's made him believe the camphor wood's this big deal, even though it's not.
Which would, and I was trying to find like strong dark grain against a yellow base and creates distinctive furniture. It is good stuff. But I just couldn't find anything that it was like, someone was like, oh my God, if you get something out of this, it's super expensive. Yeah. And there's someone that probably does woodworking listening right now that's like, you idiots, it is very expensive.
Please get in touch and let us know. I'd love to know.
But it was not readily available on the Googles when I searched that. It was like, yes, this is a thing. But whatever, like I said, chalk it up to it's the future.
Yes, it could be. To be fair, it's probably the only camphor wood left in the universe, potentially, at that point.
Fair enough. I absolutely love the gag of, don't burn my books. I don't have anything else left to burn. I've got to burn the books. These books are torturing me. Everything's about food. So Francis Bacon, like that whole list,
Harold Pinter. That's Harold Pinter.
Like, what was the van one? I forget what that.
Yeah, and it's like someone van someone. It's like, how is that related to food? Van, chip van, fish van, sweet van, ice cream van. Yeah. Oh my God, that's a stretch.
Flipping good. Oh my God. And the whole conversation about Shakespeare. Have you
yeah, I can quote it,
Have you actually read it?
Yeah,
I can quote it.
Well, no.
God.
Yeah.
And Chris Berry taking 30 seconds to get into the position of Richard III, to quote Shakespeare, and get in the hunch so that you know what's coming. You know the famous, probably the only line, that and My Kingdom for a Horse, right? Out of Richard III, everyone knows of now is the winter of discontent. And just, God, that setup is so good. Now.
And that something. Yeah.
God,
I don't know. You know it. It's fine.
Oh my God. So flipping good.
How does he read those books? He can't even read those books because he can't touch them.
My assumption is if he's read anything in the previous series, it kind of set up that, like, the Scudders would do that.
It's weird.
But yeah, I don't know how it would work. Or you just think, Holly could audiobook. I was gonna say books on tape, but I guess in Red Dwarf, maybe you still would have a book on tape.
Probably it'd be a book on a triangular CD.
Yes. So the reason I noticed the filming was different was this next scene that was coming up, which was Lister's got a little bit of scruff on his face, and he's got the dog food.
It's Rimmer's face in the background is brilliant.
And it's the angle of the camera where the dog food's up close to the camera.
Yeah.
But it's at a certain angle and Rimmer's in the back. And I was like, this isn't normal. And that's when I looked it up and was like, oh yeah, they're doing handheld and they're moving around a little bit. I can see that now. That face Rimmer has watching that dog food. But not only that, because I love effects and stuff for movies and how do they do that? That shot of the close-up on the dog food. And if you've ever done wet dog food out of a can for a dog, that looks exactly right.
Oh, it does. Yes, it does.
It looks exactly right. In fact, you brought the trivia that, contrary to the rumors, it wasn't actually dog food. And I added what it was. They made it out of tuna fish and meat jelly.
And for us British listeners, that is just tuna, not tuna fish. We don't need to specify what tuna is.
You guys don't. You just say tuna, huh?
Because everyone knows it's a fish. We don't need to add fish on the end. That's a weird Americanism that you have to say tuna fish.
What if you eat dolphin fish? You got to say dolphin fish, right?
No, because it's just...
Then you're eating a dolphin, otherwise.
What's dolphin fish?
Mahi Mahi. That's why they changed the name. Do you know that to Mahi Mahi?
I didn't realize. I just thought Mahi Mahi was Mahi Mahi. I didn't know.
Nope. It's a fish called dolphin fish, and it's a marketing thing. They changed the name so that people would eat it because they thought when they saw dolphin fish, like, I'm not going to eat dolphin.
Yeah, well, that's fair.
It was an actual fish.
Yeah, true.
That's funny. Tuna fish. I didn't even think. I love that I wrote an Americanism into our.
We just call it tuna. We wouldn't call it tuna fish because we know it's a fish.
But to get the tuna and the meat jelly on there, it looks like the gross... God, the stuff you give a dog out of a can, especially the cheap stuff, it smells so bad. And it's just got that shaky, gelatinous fat in it. And he said it was terrible. He said it was still might as well have been dog food. It was... because imagine meat jelly and tuna. That still sounds
There's
horrendous.
Part of me wishes they did. Like, I would have liked Craig Charles to have gone the whole way and just gone, I'm just going to eat dog food. Because as Tracy will always tell you, dog food has to be made fit for human consumption.
Yep. Yes,
so it's like, there's no issue with it. You're not going to die for having a fork full of dog food. Just do it, dude.
So like, here, do it. He's like, I'm not going to do it. Okay, fine. We'll make a fake version. What is that? Tuna and meat jelly. Oh, God.
That's probably worse.
Yeah. And God, it sets up another brilliant punchline of now I see why dogs lick their own testicles.
Yeah. The thing is, that joke's over-egged a little bit. He shouldn't, because he adds on, he says,
yes.
Now I know why dogs lick the testicles. Just stop there. You don't need to add on, it's to get rid of the taste of the food. That's already implied. You don't need to say that extra bit on the end.
Don't you think that extra bit harkens back to comments we made like that about series 1?
Yes.
Where it's like, oh, they were trying, like, just stop right there.
You've told the joke. People aren't stupid. They know what you're getting at. You don't need, it's like you're telling a joke for an audience that doesn't understand the joke.
Yeah, you would never need to finish that joke. God, it's just the shakiness and Rimmer's face. I can't even do it.
He's holding the fork up to his face, and you can see Rimmer in the background, and he just goes, "Don't say anything."
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It's like
just the finger back.
He knows what he's doing behind him. He's like, just, I haven't eaten for 6 days. I'm going to eat the dog food.
You can wipe that smug look off your face or whatever. It's like, yeah.
Brilliant. Probably the best scene in the whole episode, actually.
It's so good. I mean, that's why I think this one is such an instant classic, because they now know these characters so well, both the actors and the writers. They were like, we're gonna lock them in here in the Marooned together. You almost see me like, we got this. Give me an hour. We'll be back with the outline. Like, you could just go nuts with this. I mean, there are probably so many ideas they didn't get to do.
There's an interesting Americanism in there I found strange when he's talking about the dog food. He's like, this isn't dog food. And he says it's something about a steak char-broiled. We don't use the term broiled over here.
Oh, what would you say if you were going to char-broil a steak?
What is char-broiling? Just so I'm getting it straight in my head before
I mean, I might Google this a little bit. Because
grilling?
In my head, like that's what it would be. You'd be doing it over a fire.
We don't use the term broiled. It's an American thing. We would say char-grilled.
It's the process used when an item is cooked on a grated surface to sear the flavors. Yeah, so like...
Grill.
Yeah, it's like on a grill. So I guess that's, yeah.
We don't use broiled. It's not. It's a very American term for me. It's not something I would ever. Other than this, I don't think I've ever heard a British person refer to something as being char-broiled, which is weird.
I learn something every time we do these pods, and that's why I look forward to them so much.
Yeah, it's strange. Because it's like I say, it's not a term we use, and it really sticks out to me watching this episode.
Why I've heard that term, and we'll use it. They always use it for Burger King commercials. For those of you in the States, charbroiled, whatever. But in the States, if I was writing the joke, I would be like, it tastes like a grilled. To me, this is a grilled T-bone. That's what you would say. Like,
yeah, it's strange. I don't know whether at this point maybe they knew they had an American audience and they were just slipping in a couple of things to kind of. For that, maybe? How
do we do that, Lee? As we get at some point, we got to get someone who worked on the show on here. I want to ask them those questions. Like, at what point did you know you had an American audience? Did it influence anything you did?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the problem is anyone we're getting on, if that happens, and trust me, I will do my damnedest to make sure that happens. I will fling emails at whoever I can because that's what I do. That's why I've had so many decent guests on our other podcast, because I just don't give a shit. I'll ask. You're also getting someone who's, probably a little older now to try and remember writing something that they wrote 40 years ago.
But I feel like they would remember, like, oh yeah, we were surprised.
Yeah,
people in the States were saying stuff, like, I mean, obviously Doctor Who wasn't changing anything, but it knew that it was starting to get an audience in the States with PBS. So I don't know. I would love to know that.
That's the only reason I could think that they would use that term in there, if it was just, let's drop that in for the American audience that we know that we're slowly getting.
I do have to tell you, this is more funny just for me, but I'm going to tell you anyway, is as we're sitting there watching these, my wife and now we'll do another. We'll throw out the like we said previous episode. Wouldn't the chair just go through him if he's a hologram? Or because she's noticed, because she's listened to our show too. Like, oh wait a minute, like this rule doesn't apply. And I love that now I've been watching this enough from the beginning that I had a fast answer. She's like, holograms can smell when it comes to dog food.
Yep, I've got. It wasn't the dog food. It was later on. You can smell the camphor wood. That's where I put it.
Sorry. You're right. The camphor wood.
Yes.
But as fast as anything, I just went, yeah, he can smell the moon boots too.
It doesn't make sense though. Like, can holograms smell? It's because he comes in, doesn't he? He's like, camphor wood. And Lister's ass goes because he's like, oh, he knows.
So the camphor wood thing. So obviously, if you've watched this, you'll know, like, he tells him you got to burn your guitar to live. And he finally agrees to it. He says, but can I play a song? I think he plays an old Michael Jackson song, but he does it
She's
poorly.
Out of My Life. Yeah, terribly.
Yeah, and he's doing a D chord over and over, which I just love. Until Rimmer goes outside to just kind of leave him on his own. Again, no hologram cage. He can just go outside in the snow. No big deal. And then he roughly cuts out the guitar. And both times I watched this, I thought, is there a world where it's funnier if the audience is fooled too?
Okay, so you don't show him cutting it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know, because I do think there's something, and I think it's because we've been spoiled, had a good couple of punchlines at the end of episodes. And I'm like, God, would it be funny if
maybe
as he walked over and you're like, why does he but then I will say, watching Lister suffer through Rimmer coming in and probably for the first time ever commending him about what a swell guy he is, what a man of honor he is, and like, I've misjudged this book by the cover the whole time, haven't I? And he's like, this toy soldiers, burn them. No, you've sacrificed something. I want to sacrifice something.
No, I think you're right. It would be interesting. I think you would lose something, but you would also gain something. It's like which would be the better one for you to think that that Lister had actually burned his guitar and gone through, because all of that wouldn't click until he comes back in, opens the locker, and opens the locker and gets his guitar out, and you'd be like, oh my God.
And let me tell you though, speaking of just good acting, the face that Lister makes after Rimmer is like, we bonded here or whatever, like, to Crichton and the cat when they show up to rescue him, the look that Lister's face has as he shuffles over to the locker and says, excuse me, and the delivery of the excuse me and the picking up of the guitar super sheepishly and just walking out is so good. It feels so absolutely real. My God, I love it so much. And you feel like you're going to have one of those Rimmer like, rah! moments, smacking garbage pot, but you don't. And he just tells Crichton, open the cart, or open the chest, open the chest. And I love that view of the camera looking up through the cutout hole of the guitar as he looks down into it. It's a punchline that is coming because you know that it's fake, or that wasn't his real guitar being burned, but it's still the delivery by Lister is so good and so real that it just slays me when I see it.
Because he's expecting that Rimmer lose its shouty reaction, and he doesn't get it.
Nope. And he just goes back, and it's almost that thing of like, I wish he had just yelled at me instead.
Yeah. It's like that. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed.
Yes. Oh, this is such a good episode.
It really is. This is there's a bit in this episode that has influenced me even to this day. So when they are burning Napoleon's Armée du Nord, and Rimmer is humming taps,
yes,
and he does the affected. That's how I do taps if ever I hum it. Exactly how Rimmer does every time. Every time I do it, because of this episode, it doesn't matter that it's 40 years ago or whatever. That's how I hum taps if anything, just jokingly, that weird like.
When in Rome, do as the Snaymores.
Brilliant. It's just it's an episode that belies this stupid little sci-fi comedy.
It's so good. I mean, if you were like, okay, this was an interesting kickoff. We got some new characters and new performers in this first of the series 3, and then you hit this, and it's so built upon everything else that has come before. It is great, and I don't think I appreciated, because I watched it a bit out of order, how well they built up things about how much of a slob Lister is and things like that. They're actually built upon more than anything. Like even the way now, like he stopped wearing, like, we didn't talk about this, but the costume for Lister has changed.
Yes.
He's now got his leather coat and his hat, and like, you're not wearing like leftover technician gear or whatever he used to wear off Red Dwarf.
Rimmer's the same. He stopped wearing his technician outfit now as well.
Yep, and he's got his green shimmery-ish outfit with the patch of the TV show Red Dwarf logo almost. His H has changed.
Yep, that's all like holographic, like that.
Yeah, it's got
lenticular.
There you go, lenticular. That's the word I was couldn't think of. Yeah. So things have changed more than just. I think in the previous episode we didn't bring it up because there's so many changes. You kind of forget about those, and in this episode you sit with it. But now in my head, that's the Lister outfit. When I told you at 9 no one knew who or 10 knew who I was, and I went to my school and dressed up as Lister for Halloween, I wore a big black bomber jacket with the fuzzy thing
and the color,
and tried to do Lister. And it's like they're getting comfortable in their own new world, both in the reality of the show, but also like in the story of the show at the same time. I mean, the reality of like making the show, then also the reality of like the storyline of the show. And it's so good, and I love it. And I don't think it's something that I would ever have appreciated if I didn't have the opportunity to go back and sort of watch it the way we're watching it.
Yes, because we've watched them all in such quick succession that you've seen that build-up of those characters, and this just embodies everything that Rimmer and Lister are completely. And like you say, that the other 3 characters aren't really in it that much, and it just allows them to breathe and be themselves. And like I say, I think it very much feels like an homage to the first couple of series to basically say to the viewers that, like, don't forget, we know what this show is, and we know who the main characters are, and they're not going away. They're still going to be here, and we're going to do these episodes every now and again. It's going to be interesting because I don't remember specifically what's coming forward. It'll be interesting to see how many more little episodes like this there is. I mean, you obviously will know more. Don't spoil it, but yeah. I was going to say I think the thing with this episode is you could drop this in season 6 and it would still fit. Yeah,
it wouldn't matter. You could almost put this anywhere after the midway point of series 2. Right, this concept you could have put it anywhere and let it be its thing. I do love how his guitar has changed. It used to be this crappy Ovation guitar that I think I made fun of, acoustic guitar, and now it's this Les Paul knockoff.
Copy.
I think
a Les Paul copy. He says, yeah. It's an authentic Les Paul copy.
Yeah, and I laugh because like. Those are cheaper than the actual Les Paul though. So I as a kid, I'm like, that's what I would rather. I guess that's what I can afford is to get that one. I still don't have a Les Paul.
No,
so that's one of those little dream guitars I've had sitting off on the side for a while. But man, it's so good. What did you? Wait. I feel like you had one other trivia we should mention.
I had a quick look through. I think the only one really worth sort of mentioning was the Rimmer outside of. So it says that he's apparently able to remain as a hologram for 6 days without any help from Holly, which I guess we're going to get explained later. And you kind of brought it up in the last episode, which is the result of his the hologram's light B, which I don't remember what that is. So I'm intrigued to find out.
So in the book, and I can't remember if it's in the very first book or the second, but I think they explain it. Like, books got more time, right? So it explains some of the concepts. And the light B that floats, or the idea is it's this thing that floats around the inside of a hologram and projects the hologram.
Okay.
So there is this one physical presence. So I'm curious if it's series 3, we get the answer that it is 6 days. Because I don't remember it being that specific, but I'm sure that'll...
Because I'm assuming that's why it can last, because that'll have like a backup battery, I'm guessing, is it that will last 6 days? That's the idea behind it.
Yeah, that'd be the idea.
That makes sense. So why I needed a cage earlier on, then I'm not quite sure. But all right.
I have no idea why I needed a cage early on, but it made for some good go-go dancing.
It was funny, wasn't it?
What did you rate this one?
See, I like this episode, but I enjoyed Backwards more, I think. So I think I give this a 7. It is a really solid episode, very different from everything. You've given it an 8, haven't you?
I love it. We completely reversed each from... Yes, this is great. I totally did. Yep.
Yeah, it was a really good episode, and I love that it's like a character study, and that there's still, even 3 series in, that they still are... It still hasn't become that ridiculous sci-fi comedy series, which it could have so easily become, and it hasn't, and I love that about it. I'm sure there are episodes. We're going to get episodes like that, the next one, for definite.
Oh, very sci-fi.
Yes. But I love
forward to it.
That they're still doing these more sort of... It is more serious. There's still jokes in there and it's still funny, but it is a much more serious episode. And I love that they feel 3 series in that they can still do that. And I hope that continues moving forward.
Oh, yeah, it does. And well, we'll get to it when we get to the end of series 6. But I think that's a thing that is a thread that sticks around for or is part of the Red Dwarf. That ability to find some serious stuff to stick to package around the show or package around the premise that helps out.
I mean, that's the thing. It sounds like I've never watched these episodes. I'm just saying it's such a long time since I've watched them, and I haven't seen from now onwards a whole lot. But as I said to you, once I watched these and started to remember beats throughout them, and I'll do the same when I watch the next one. I don't remember. I couldn't sit now and tell you the whole premise of the next episode, but once I start watching it, I've no doubt I'll start remembering beats.
Oh yeah.
In it.
Well, it's like the opening to Backwards. I could not have told you that the Wilma Flintstone bit was the beginning of Backwards, but I could almost quote it verbatim. Well, I remember it.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have we... So we, again, pulling the curtain back, we watch 2 episodes, then we'll record 2 episodes of the podcast back to back. So how many times have we been talking about an episode and gone, oh, hang on, no, that's the next episode, that wasn't this one.
Right.
Yeah. Because it's like a lot of them are kicked off with a joke that isn't anything to do with the rest of the episode. So you could put them attached to any episode, really.
Yeah, it was always that setup to just kind of show you regular life on the ship before whatever happens. It does, not to be an old man on the porch about things in my day, but man, I miss shows like this where it's like, we're just going to write solid single episodes that are funny and not try to worry about these overarching storylines and stuff, which, to go back to the previous episode, might be what was smart about just blasting past this idea of the boys, Lister had the twins, we moved on. Because that was a thread that was hanging through 2 series. And so it made it feel like, oh, will the show always have a thing that's continuing on, and I like that it's like, nope, self-contained, here we go. Let's make this show.
See, I'm the opposite. I'm quite happy for each episode to stand by itself, but I would like it to kind of not necessarily each episode be connected, but feel like a progression of the story. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, as we keep watching, I do feel like it feels that way because you can feel the passage of time.
Yes.
And then in certain series, they'll get obsessed with like, okay, enough. We have to figure out how to travel faster. And that becomes a thing, that pushes the plot forward in a few episodes where it's like a drive to try and figure out how to start traveling quicker and, that kind of stuff. So,
even though...
Because right now... Right, the end of series 1, episode 1, the slime's coming back home to Earth, right? Well, now they've given up on that.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they could literally have just put Lister in stasis and then just figured it out however long it would take. But no.
Yeah, no, it's just...
this is it now.
But it'll come back. I mean, again, the show does a good job of reinventing itself when it needs to. But I did. Solid 8 out of 10. Very tight show. Very tight comedy. I said, this here is my kind of dwarf.
It's a very, like you say, 2 very different episodes to open this series.
Yep. And both good. Those are good, quick 1-2 punch of very good. And I'm excited for the next one because in my memory, it's quite good.
Oh,
we'll see.
Yeah.
I think it's funny when you or I have a memory of one that we're like, this one's killer. And then you go, oh, actually, I ended up liking this other one better on the rewatch than the one I thought was so good. You know,
although Queeg did live up to your memories of it.
Queeg, definitely. Yep. Out of the park. I love Queeg.
Yeah, God. It is. It is such a good episode. I think that's probably been my favorite episode so far.
Yeah. I think Queeg still sits on top right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've
got moments that I love better, certain moments that stand out to me. But like, as an overall episode, Queeg is still the best
100%, yeah. And that, like I say, Thanks for the Memory was always my favourite. And it was like, I don't know whether I've overwatched it at this point.
Well, that, if that brings us to the end of the episode, that's a good segue to say we've asked, and it's not like we got to put a timeline on it, but I think as people start to rate the episodes as we have done so far, I'd be curious to know what people's actual ratings of their order of like best episodes stuff. Yeah. I think for you and I, definitely we have Queeg up front, and it'll be interesting as time goes along to see what shifts around. I mean, we need to make like a living document that has our order of favorite or something.
Absolutely, yeah. And even if we just came up with like a top 5 by the end of it, would be interesting to see.
Bingo. Which I think you could do by the time we get to the end of series 3. I think you have enough episodes, to give yourself a top 5. And then you can futz with the order and add new ones in as you go. I like that idea.
That would be interesting.
A good one.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. We'll do that by the end of series 3. Well, that brings us to the end of this podcast. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Dwarf Memory and Twitter at Dwarf_Memory for all show updates.
Yeah, please subscribe, rate and review wherever you get the podcast. We'd really appreciate it. Like I say, our numbers are definitely going up. We are getting people on board, so letting people know what we are doing and that it is worth listening to if you like it would definitely help. And if you want to send any of your comments or little stories about your journey with Red Dwarf, you can email them to us at dwarfmemory@gmail.com, because we've had quite a few in so far. It's been interesting getting those listener sort of emails and comments and stuff. It's good because it shows that we are doing something all right, I guess.
I love the one you sent of the American guy like me who said he had a very similar story to how he stumbled across Red Dwarf and watching it. And it was neat to know. It's like, hey, there's others of us. Like, it's been great. For everybody that's reaching out, it's really awesome.
It really is. We might not necessarily respond, but we do read them all, and everything you get, I pass on to Blake. So, yeah, we really appreciate it.
But we'll try to get better at responding. But we'll talk about them on the show. That's the big one. Yeah. I like talking about them on the show if we get a chance. Now, this next episode that we'll be discussing is back to the sci-fi for Series 3, Episode 3, called Polymorph. So be sure to watch before you listen to our next episode and give Keisha a chance.
Yes, I remember little bits of it, and I've seen a lot of memes from that episode. So actually putting it together and watching the whole episode is going to be interesting because I don't fully remember it, but I'm looking forward. Like I said, I'm looking forward to all of them now because my memory isn't great of them all. So it's kind of watching them fresh, but not really.
That's exactly how I feel about it.
It's going to be fun.
I keep going. I don't really know this one except for that one episode. I've never seen this, where they had traveled back in time to the Red Dwarf.
Stasis Leak, yeah.
Stasis Leak, yeah. That was. But they've always been like, I don't really know this one. Then we start watching and go, oh wait, I do remember.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember this.
So anyway, Blake, as it transpired, there weren't any black holes.
But you saw them. You saw them on the monitor.
They weren't black holes.
What were they?
Grit. 5 specks of grit on the scannerscope. You see, the thing about grit is it's black, and the thing about scannerscopes...
Oh, shut up. Come on, let's go. Something happened here. Something that made us closer. I saw a side of Lee Malaby that I didn't even know existed. He's not just an irresponsible, selfish drifter out for number 1. He's a man of honor.
Excuse me.
Open the trunk. Let me get the hacksaw, and you follow me.
Where are we going?
We're going to do to you what Alexander the Great once did to me.